Night falls over Duarte, California, January 30th, 1992. An abandoned SUV sits between rows of avocado trees on Royal Oaks Drive. Engine cold, doors locked from the outside. Inside, two men slumped forward, hands bound behind their backs with wire, both fatally shot, a calculated act. One of them is Keith Stone Thomas, 30 years old, an OG from the Rollin 60 neighborhood Crips, once feared and respected across every boulevard in South Central Los Angeles. Even the Robin Hoods were shocked. The Los Angeles Times would write, "It was unthinkable that someone of his stature, a warrior, a survivor, would die not in battle, but in betrayal." This wasn't a drive-by. This wasn't retaliation. This was business gone bad, a marijuana consignment going sideways, a pickup that turned into an ambush. The killers? Four young do-rock Crips, kids Stone had broken bread with, guys he'd fronted weight to, guys who decided that robbing their supplier was easier than paying him back. "You ain't gotta do us like this, cuz," Stone pleaded in his final moments. It didn't matter. By sunrise, word spread through the city like a shockwave. From Crenshaw to Century, from Slauson to Hyde Park, OGs from every set, Crips, Bloods, even rivals, stood silent. Because Stone wasn't just another casualty, he was a relic, a man who still lived by the old code when the new generation had already forgotten it ever existed. His death marked more than a murder. It marked the end of an era when South Central still had rules, when respect meant something, when even gangsters believed in honor. This is the story of Keith Stone Thomas, the last OG who still believed in a code. Keith Cardell Thomas came into the world in 1961 on a quiet block off Cimarron Street in South Central Los Angeles. A small bungalow, 2 bedrooms, a struggling mother, no father. His mother, a UCLA graduate, worked in public health for Los Angeles County, educated, driven, determined to give her sons a life that wasn't trapped by the zip code printed on their mail. But determination alone couldn't shield a boy from what the city was becoming. Los Angeles in the 60s was a powder keg. Racial tension, unemployment, and the ghost of the Watts riots still smoldering under the asphalt. The neighborhoods were changing faster than families could keep up. Gangs were forming not yet as empires, but as defense lines. Young men protecting their blocks because nobody else would. The streets were already choosing sides. Keith was 13 when the first gun was pointed at his face, not by another kid, by the police. It happened in West Los Angeles. He and his cousin had gone with his mother to a bank. 2 clean-cut black teenagers waiting in line. A teller panicked, whispered something. Within minutes, more than a dozen officers stormed in with weapons drawn. "Get down," someone shouted. The 2 boys froze. His mother screamed, "They're children." "I didn't do nothing," Keith said, trembling, staring down the barrels of guns he didn't understand. The officers eventually realized their mistake. No apology, just orders to move along. That moment stayed with him, a silent trauma that cracked something inside. He learned that the system didn't protect boys like him, that survival meant never showing fear again. By high school, the Crenshaw corridor was alive with both rhythm and danger. Lowriders rumbling past liquor stores, funk music mixing with gunfire echoing from blocks away. It was here Keith earned the nickname Stone, not because he was cold-blooded, but because nothing shook him. He could stare down a crowd, outthink a fight, calm a situation that should have exploded. The Rollin 60 neighborhood Crips were still young then, born from the neighborhood Crip movement of the early 70s, stretching from Slauson Avenue to Hyde Park. They weren't the largest yet, but they were organized, structured. They called each other homies, relatives, soldiers. Keith wasn't a founder, but he was there early, watching, learning, understanding that respect in South Central wasn't given, it was earned in blood and loyalty. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't loud. He wasn't the kind of guy who fired first just to make a name. He earned status the long way, by showing up, by keeping his word, by holding his ground when others folded. Even older heads saw it. Stone had presence, one veteran member later said. You could tell he was going to be somebody. By the late 70s, Crenshaw Boulevard had become the new frontier for Los Angeles street culture. Cruise nights, block parties, hustlers flashing gold and chrome. To outsiders, it looked like style. To insiders, it was survival, dressed up in swagger. The police called them criminals. The community called them our boys. They were both right. Keith learned fast that the line between protector and predator was paper thin. He saw how arguments over pride turned into funerals, how a handshake could turn into a setup. But even then, he clung to one principle: violence should mean something. You don't shoot kids, you don't shoot women, you don't shoot in churches, he'd remind the youngsters years later. You handle your beef, not the whole neighborhood. That philosophy, that code, set him apart. It was old school, inherited from a time when even gangsters followed rules. But Los Angeles was moving into a new era. Cocaine was coming. Automatic weapons were flooding the streets. And the kids who once looked up to men like Stone were starting to see chaos as a shortcut to fame. Still, through the late 70s and early 80s, Keith kept balance. He threw backyard parties instead of drive-bys. If a dispute broke out, he'd settle it with fists, not guns. The streets respected that. They knew Stone wasn't soft, he was controlled. The rare kind of leader who believed fear could be earned without firing a bullet. He'd soon learned that control had an expiration date. By 1983, crack cocaine was carving through Los Angeles like wildfire. The neighborhoods around Slauson and Florence turned into battlefields. Every set, Crips, Bloods, Hoover criminals fought for the same corners. Money replaced respect, fear replaced loyalty, and the rules that Stone lived by began to sound like nostalgia. But for now, in this moment, on Cimarron Street, under the smog orange sky of South Central, Keith Thomas still believed the code could survive. He still believed discipline meant protection and unity meant power. He didn't know it yet, but the very streets he protected would one day turn on him. The same loyalty he preached would become the weapon that ended his life, because in Los Angeles, every story that begins with honor eventually runs into betrayal. (1980) South Central hums like a live wire, hot, tense, unpredictable. By then, Keith Stone Thomas didn't need volume. He had presence. When he stepped onto Cimarron, talk dropped a register. When he said enough, fists unclenched. That's how order worked where cops didn't. One man whose word carried weight. He rose inside the Rollin 60 neighborhood Crips as the set grew teeth. From Slauson to Hyde Park, every alley a chessboard. Older heads called him steady hands. Younger ones copied his calm. Eyes first, words second, weapons last. His message was simple: make violence mean something, or don't pick it up at all. The code wasn't poetry, it was survival. Don't shoot kids, don't shoot mothers, don't fire in churches, hospitals, or cemeteries. Don't turn a one-on-one into a war. Settle what you start. Carry your choices. We ain't civilians, he'd say, but we ain't animals either. Street life ran on math, inputs, outputs, margins. Cocaine money warped the equation, but Stone tried to bend it, not break it. He built small mobile crews, disciplined units that moved weed and cash across states. Seattle, Portland, Vegas. He fronted weight, tracked every debt, and demanded punctuality. Respect, he told them, is payment plus time. His life had two worlds. The first, the backyard barbecues, 50 friends, 500 in ribs, Raiders on the big screen, laughter louder than sirens. The second, the midnight roads, headlights off, trunk heavy, pistol silent but ready. He loved the first and tolerated the second, believing one existed to protect the other. 1988, burglary and accessory to robbery. Not a headline, just a case number. He did his time, came home, and doubled down on his creed. The code didn't break, it calcified. By the late 80s, he'd earned distance from chaos, a quiet home above the city where he could plan and protect. He warned his crews, don't sell where you live, don't poison your own block. Meanwhile, the city's weapons evolved. The small .22s of yesterday gave way to automatics that chewed through walls. Drive-bys made every corner a trap. Stone kept repeating the rules. No kids, no mothers, no sanctuaries. You shoot wild, you shoot wrong, he told a hothead, popping the magazine before handing it back. But the new generation didn't want restraint. The streets now rewarded speed and spectacle. Flash got followers. Fear got fame. Some youngsters treated respect like a shortcut. Terror today, legend tomorrow. Stone pushed back with presence. He mediated beefs before they turned fatal. He'd walk enemies through it till fists closed the score. Sometimes he'd call a rival's mother before the funeral did. He became translator, referee, diplomat, the rare OG both sides trusted. His operation grew. Marijuana moved on consignment. Front today, collect tomorrow. Word spread that Stone supplied the Duarte Crips farther east. Risky business, but he managed it with clarity. Money up, violence down, deadlines real. He indulged in symbols, a '63 Impala on hydraulics, a speedboat, a house full of laughter. They weren't trophies. They were proof he'd made it out without leaving. Sundays were sacred. Raiders games, dominoes, smoke in the air, voices forgetting time. Yet the city never slept. The ledger kept growing. Every piece he kept bought him a week. Every slight unpaid cost him a year. He paid attention, read faces, read weather, knew which streets boiled after midnight, which names couldn't share oxygen. He also understood mercy's price. Sparing a man meant carrying him. Carry too many and you slow down. Slow down and the city rolls you under. Mercy took muscle and belief that tomorrow could still be better than tonight. That belief was the most old school thing about him. By 1991, the center was collapsing. A new crop of soldiers fluent in chaos. They loved 30-round magazines more than silence. To them, Stone's code sounded like scripture, honorable but obsolete. They wore the colors, skipped the discipline. Still, Stone held his ground. He kept his books clean, his parties safe, his youngest close enough to copy his calm. Order is how we stay alive, he told them. Pay your debts, keep your word, go home. There's a tomorrow if you don't burn it. But tomorrow was running out. Consignment depends on trust, and trust is fragile currency. The math only works until greed rewrites the formula. A man who fronts weight must believe in honor stronger than profit. Stone believed too much. He walked into that orchard in Duarte with nothing but history protecting him. That's the tragedy of the code. It builds a shield that becomes a target. Live by it long enough, and those without one will aim for its crack. In the end, the code didn't fail Stone. The people who owed him did. January 30th, 1992. The sun was fading over the San Gabriel foothills, that bruised orange light Los Angeles gets before darkness folds in. Keith "Stone" Thomas drove a rented SUV east, a duffel on the back seat, a quiet partner named Danny riding shotgun. He'd done this route so many times it felt like muscle memory, paved trust, stretching from Crenshaw to Duarte. He believed routine kept danger predictable. He believed wrong. For years, Stone had balanced two fragile currencies, time and trust. He could measure money by the gram and respect by punctuality. But belief was weightless until it crushed you. Every line he'd drawn between loyalty and liability was beginning to blur. The street no longer feared betrayal, it normalized it. You could feel it in the way people talked softer around him, eyes darting away mid-sentence as if caution were contagious. That night, he carried no gun. He didn't need one. He had his reputation. And reputation, to Keith, was armor. The meat was routine, a pickup, a payout, nothing more. Waiting at the end of that route was a younger associate from the Do-Rock Crips, known on the streets as Anthony Ant Dog. Keith had vouched for him when few would. Let him inside his circle, his home, his weekends. He'd called him little brother. Ant Dog called him big homie. It sounded like family until business asked what family was worth. Stone once told a friend, "You can't count on fear to keep men honest. You count on trust." That philosophy built his empire. It would also end it. When he and Danny pulled up outside the Duarte house, the air fell off, too still, like a room waiting for bad news. The porch light buzzed, moths circling. Ant Dog came out smiling, arms open, calling him OG, the sound of comfort laced with counterfeit. Inside, music played low. Dominoes clicked on a table. A few unfamiliar faces lingered too long at the edges. Every instinct in Stone's body told him to leave, but pride silences instinct. He'd spent years proving that calm could control chaos. He wasn't about to flinch now. Money first, then wait. That was the system. He handed off the package, leaned back, joked about the Raiders. Then someone shifted behind him, the scrape of a chair, the metallic hiccup of a slide chambering around. The room froze. "Get on the floor." Keith turned just enough to see the barrel, black and shaking in young hands. He didn't beg, he didn't run, he just sighed. "You ain't gotta do us like this, cuz," he said quietly. "We all eat if we stay straight." They tied his wrists, taped his eyes, cuffed Danny beside him. The SUV was searched, ransacked. One of them laughed, nervous, guilty, unready for what came next. Because once a gun is drawn, choice disappears. They forced both men into the back of the SUV, covering them with a shower curtain and a tablecloth. The engine started. The tires rolled off pavement onto dirt, each bump counting distance like a metronome. Somewhere between the last streetlight and the first row of avocado trees, silence replaced music. The orchard swallowed them. Danny murmured a prayer. Stone told him to breathe. "They'll come to their senses," he said, still believing in reason. But reason was a relic. Greed had already written its own ending. Two muffled pops cracked the night, close range, execution style. Then nothing but wind through leaves. When deputies found the SUV hours later, it was parked half hidden among the trees, doors ajar, hands bound behind backs, both men shot once in the head. No struggle, no mercy. The autopsy later called it clean work. The streets called it treachery. News spread before sunrise. Stone's gone. Phones rang from Slauson to Century. In every barbershop and backyard, disbelief echoed the same question. How? The answer was whispered, almost shameful. One of ours did it. Even rival sets felt the shock. The Rollin 60s had lost their stabilizer, the diplomat who could stop a war with a phone call. Now there was no phone call. Within days, revenge talk flared. Older heads tried to calm it. Stone wouldn't want that. Younger ones spat back. Then he died for nothing. LAPD raided Duarte, rounded up 4 members of the Do-Rock Crips tied to the case. Headlines framed it as another drug deal gone bad. Reporters loved that phrase. It was short, bloodless, tidy, but to the people who knew him, it wasn't business gone wrong. It was the code collapsing. In Windsor Hills, candles lined his driveway. Cars idled outside the gate. engines humming like quiet grief. At the memorial, no preacher could explain how a man who kept order ended up executed over pocket change. Mothers wept for what the streets had become. Fathers stared at the floor, knowing their sons had learned from men now dead. Stone's death didn't trigger a war, it triggered a mirror. Everyone saw themselves in it. The loyal man who trusted too much, the hustler who envied too easily, the generation that forgot the meaning of restraint. Ant Dog vanished into legend and rumor. Some said he fled the state. Others swore he was caught and folded. None of it mattered. The truth was simpler. Betrayal doesn't disappear. It just changes zip codes. For months afterward, people used Stone's name like punctuation. He wouldn't have let this happen. He'd have made peace. But peace requires gravity, and his had been buried in Duarte. The murder sent a message louder than any drive-by. If a man like Stone could be crossed, no one was untouchable. If the code couldn't protect him, maybe it never protected anyone. Across South LA, a quiet shift began. Men stopped meeting face to face. Trust turned digital, transactional. Guns replaced conversation. Deals shortened, tempers shortened, lifespans shortened. The new creed was speed. Money today, memory tomorrow. From the outside, nothing seemed different. Same corners, same colors, same noise. But inside, something sacred had cracked. You could feel it in the way laughter ended faster, how eyes scanned rooms twice, how everyone counted hands before counting blessings. Keith Stone Thomas had built an empire out of belief, and belief had pulled the trigger. He wasn't killed by rivals or police or fate. He was killed by the idea that loyalty could still live in a business built on fear. When the news finally faded from the papers, the myth began. Another cautionary legend filed under lessons the streets never learned. But among the few who remembered the way he said, "Order is how we stay alive," there was silence heavier than guilt, because deep down they knew the truth. The headlines missed. The streets didn't just lose a man that night. They lost their moral compass. The streets mourned him, but something deeper died with him, the code. The funeral drew hundreds, friends, relatives, and men who once ruled corners, now standing shoulder to shoulder in uneasy silence. It wasn't about colors that day, it was about disbelief. In a city that measures worth by fear, grief felt foreign. Once upon a time, the Rollin 60s were a family, said Chilton Alphonse, a Crenshaw district gang worker. Now, I think a lot of these youngsters are beginning to question, is it really worth it? No one argued. The word brotherhood no longer meant what it used to. Outside the chapel, engines idled for hours, bass lines rumbling under low conversations that went nowhere. Old enemies nodded at each other without words. Truce born of exhaustion, not forgiveness. Mothers clutched photos instead of flags. Every face carried the same quiet question. If Stone couldn't survive the game he mastered, who could? Even the cops parked down the block seemed smaller that day, watching a world they could never control bury one of its own. When the casket went down, the noise that followed wasn't weeping. It was the hush of recognition. The idea that someone who'd kept order could die by chaos, that the man who enforced restraint had been undone by its absence. The years that followed blurred like smoke. By the mid-90s, Los Angeles had changed tempo. The Crips weren't neighborhood crews anymore. They were quick-turn outfits chasing profit. Set names became brands. Loyalty turned into leverage. Violence, once restrained by unwritten rules, became advertisement, louder, faster, careless. Drive-bys were currency, retaliation, reflex. Older OGs faded, some locked away, others buried. The rest folded into day jobs that paid less but promised breath. The next generation grew up with automatics, not advice. They didn't inherit discipline, they inherited defense. As one counselor put it later, after Stone, everyone had a gun, but no one had a code. By 2000, the Rollin 60s was still a presence, still feared but fractured. Subsets replaced structure. The name survived, the unity didn't. What used to be rules became nostalgia. To police and prosecutors, Keith Stone Thomas was a file closed, a gang leader, a casualty of his own trade, a case that proved their equation of crime and consequence. To the streets, his image split down the middle. For some, he was the last OG who tried to civilize chaos. For others, a relic whose idealism got him killed. He died believing you could run the streets with honor. History and the headlines proved him wrong. Even rivals respected him, though the word respect had changed value. They called him old school, half praise, half dismissal. In the new economy of attention, restraint was outdated. Fear filmed better than discipline. Cameras replaced conscience, spectacle replaced substance. Drive through Crenshaw today and his shadow still lingers. Murals stare back from walls, some for him, most for the generations that followed. Candles gutter under freeway overpasses. Street signs read like memorials. Slauson, Hyde Park, Cimarron. The Rollin 60s remain, their story rewritten in new accents and new mediums. When Nipsey Hussle, himself raised within the same set, tried to turn the name into ownership and outreach, some saw it as redemption, others as rebranding. The line between legacy and survival has never been thinner. Would Stone recognize his neighborhood now? He'd know the streets, but not the rhythm. The loyalty he preached, built on patience and debt paid in respect, has been traded for speed. Fame first, life second, every argument filmed, every death replayed. The code he lived by has been buried under algorithms and impulse. That code wasn't scripture, it was a boundary, a belief that violence had rules, that even the damned owed the world restraint. Without it, the streets became pure reaction. No sanctuaries, no exceptions, no tomorrows that feel guaranteed. Yet for those who remember him, memory still flickers like a pilot light, a reminder that for a moment, order existed in the dark. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't a villain. He was a man who believed rules could hold back ruin and learned what happens when they don't. Keith Stone Thomas wasn't the last OG alive. He was the last who still believed in rules.